Look at them. Yes, there you go. Celebrating. Celebrating Britishness. It's perfect. They look so happy. They look so happy. They look so excited. That's nice. Fried bologna as far as the eye can see. No, that's right. What did I tell you about the riots last year, whenever that was? Last year, I think. It was a festival. It's a festival for them. Those race riots, that's a festival. It's a celebration of their culture. Because this is their culture. This is cathartic for them. Should be like this. Should be like this. It doesn't bother me at all. No. This is Jason Voorhees without the hockey mask. No, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. When people stop pretending to be what they're not. What they've never been. This is a celebration of their culture. That's what it is, truly. Everything it means to be British. Hate, paranoia, insecurity, fear, violent, ugly, drunk. Huh. What could be more English than that? And not a dentist in all that whole 150,000 of them, probably. All rallying around a convicted hooligan, convicted fraudster, stalker, drug dealer as their national hero. It's perfect. It's perfect. Couldn't be more English. And of course, they're angry. Yes, they're angry. They feel like they're losing their country. And that's on you. Wallahi, that's on you. All you immigrants, all you Muslims who went over there, the Africans, Caribbeans, Asians, and so forth, that's on you. Because you believed them. And you never should have believed them. You believed them when they said that they were multicultural. You know, that they're tolerant. And that they could accept you ever being a Brit. You thought that they would treat you, for some reason, I don't know why, you thought that they would treat you one way in your home country and another way in their country. So that's on you. That's your own naivete, your own gullibility. They are monoculturalists, and they always have been. Monoculturalists. They don't even like other so-called white people. That's right. They hate the French. They hate the Germans. They hate the Polish. You know, they hate the Russians. And everyone knows what they did to the Irish, how they treated the Irish. And the Irish just about have to be the most palest skinned people on this planet. No, they're monoculturalists. All the Europeans are. The British are, and the rest of them are. There's no difference. That's why their entire history, just right up until like yesterday, was nothing but endless wars against each other. But somehow, wallahi, I don't know how, but somehow you thought that they would welcome you into their country. I told you before, they look at you exactly the same in London as they looked at you when you were in India, or they looked at you in Africa, or they looked at you when you were working their sugar plantations in Jamaica. No, they didn't look down at you in your own countries. They didn't look down at you like that because of where you were. They treated you like that because of who you are. You understand me? But when you immigrate over there, you know, whether it's to the UK or to America or to Australia or wherever else in the so-called West, you're calling their bluff. You understand? You're calling their bluff about tolerance, about multiculturalism. And yes, it turns out that it was always just a bluff. It's always been a bluff. It's fake. It's like someone with a fake university degree. You know, you start talking to them about their supposed field of study, and they can wing it for a while. They can, you know, improv for a while. But eventually it comes out that they just have no idea what they're talking about. They're a dropout. Eventually they're going to start stuttering and talking nonsense because you put them on the spot. And you can't tell a Westerner, you know, to put up or shut up because they can't shut up. So you can't tell them that. They'll lash out. They'll break. They'll explode when you call them on their bluff. You can set your watch to that. That's like clockwork. Oh, they can't take that kind of pressure. They can't take the pressure of having to actually live up to the values that they preach about. They can't do it. And they'll come after you. They'll come after you if you put them on the spot. I mean, imagine yourself. This is what it's like. Imagine yourself. Whatever you hate. You know, everybody hates something. Doesn't matter what it is. Anything that you can't stand. Just think about anything you can't stand. It's a smell or it's a type of music or like if you hate your job, for example. You hate your job, you hate the people on your job. Think about how miserable it is. You know, how hard it is to keep that hate all bottled up. All day long, you have to play the role. You have to be polite. You have to be cooperative with your coworkers. But the whole time, you can't actually stand them. They're driving you up the wall. And then on top of that, you're also in a job that you're not even qualified for, right? You say you lied on your CV, you lied on your resume, just so you could get the job. So now, not only do you have to go along with the coworkers that you can't stand, you also have to pretend like you know what you're doing. You have to pretend like you're doing your job, even though you don't know how to do that job. It's like you got hired for quantum computing or something. Meanwhile, you've only ever worked as a line cook. You have no idea what you're doing. That's a lot of pressure. You put yourself under a lot of pressure. Eventually, you're going to break. Well, that's the British. That's the British right now. You never believed in tolerance. Wallahi. The truth is, you never believed in tolerance. You never believed in multiculturalism. You never respected the people that you colonized. In fact, you never even saw the people that you colonized as full human beings. You always saw them as inferior. You always saw them as deserving of subjugation, deserving of exploitation. And now you have to pretend otherwise. And you're breaking, you're buckling under the pressure because you can't do it, because you are the way you are. So, yes, this big celebration. It's a coming out party, basically. England is coming out of the closet, reasserting their core Western British identity as bigots. Because the way people have always been is the way that those people will always be. And the only thing that has ever proven to change that about any people is Islam. Christianity didn't change you. The so-called Enlightenment didn't change you. Secularism didn't change you. Science, technology, and what have you. Humanism. None of this changed you. None of this has ever changed you. None of it has ever pushed you to become better human beings. You've always been just as you are. You're exactly the same as you were 10,000 years ago with only slightly better hygiene. Now, I'm telling you, there were people who showed up to protest against that festival of hateful British values. There were people who showed up to protest. I'm telling you, you're in denial. Everyone in the Global South knows that Tommy Robinson is an apt representative of the UK, an apt representative of England. He's no different morally or in terms of character than a Winston Churchill or a Margaret Thatcher or an Oliver Cromwell. They're all thugs. They've never been anything but thugs. Ask the Irish. Ask the people who've known them the longest. Oh, they're vicious people. They're vicious, paranoid, insecure people. Do you know in Ireland, they literally made a law in Ireland that it wasn't allowed for men to walk in the streets with their hands in their pockets because the British were afraid that they might pull out a weapon. That's how scared they are. Because they know that they never do right by anyone. They know that they never do right by the people that they put themselves in power over. They abuse and misuse everyone. So that puts you in a constant state of fear. You can't be hateful and confident at the same time. No, if you're hateful and you're vicious, then you're also always going to be scared and insecure because you know that you might get caught out. You know, you might be caught slipping, and your victims might take some retributive justice on you. So, of course, your only course of action is always going to be aggression. It's always going to be aggression. Offense is the best defense. Isn't that what they say? They came up with that. So yes, in my opinion, this march or this rally or whatever you want to call it, this festival of British values is absolutely and quintessentially British. Now, if you think that Tommy Robinson is misrepresenting British culture, again, you're in denial. You're either in denial or you're not familiar with British history. No, he represents both the past and the future of the United Kingdom. And by the past, I mean the pre-colonial past. Because you're not going to be able to do like you did in that past anymore. You're not going to be able to do colonization like you did back in those days. Your opportunities and your capacity for colonization are over. So the UK is going to return to what it always was throughout history prior to colonization. It's going to be poor, sickly, violent, and miserable, engaged in constant tension and conflict with the rest of Europe, with their neighbors and with the rest of Europe. That's your past and that's your future. You only got rich through stealing and through pillage of the Global South. And technically, if you understand economically what that means, that makes you actually a dependency, technically. And now the ones upon whom you have been historically dependent through exploitation and subjugation, now they're rising. And now they actually have decision-making authority. Or anyway, they're increasingly securing that authority. So whereas before you could be an obnoxious and a belligerent dependency, well, now you're going to have to be an obsequious dependency. And I know that makes you mad, but it is what it is. This is the way the world turns. You can't steal someone else's light and claim to have a bright future. No, you can't. Doesn't work. No, I agree with Tommy Robinson. We're on the same page on this issue, because he absolutely represents the UK, and his supporters are absolutely the true Britons, hooligans and criminals. And of course, it's not just him. It's not just the UK, obviously. The entirety of the collective West is the same. Europe, America, like I said, Australia, Canada, and on and on. They're just taking their costume off. The veneer is coming down. You know, it's like those veneers that you put on your teeth. You know, you remove the veneers, and the person that you thought had this perfect, beautiful smile, well, it's actually rotted. It's actually decaying. They actually have like gravel for teeth underneath the veneers. Well, that's the West. The veneers are coming off. And I'll tell you why. It's coming off because the image isn't important anymore. Because the West isn't as important anymore. So now they can relax. Now the West can relax. They can unwind. They can let their stomach out, you know? They can be themselves. I'm sure it's been exhausting. Look, you know, that's why I say that, that's why I have said that I don't personally hold out any realistic hope of the West. You know, a lot of Muslims over there in the West, in America and so on, they imagine that there can maybe be some sort of mass conversion to Islam. I don't think so. They might be denied this grace. They might be denied this rescue. I don't see something like that happening. Because again, if you just look at their history, it's not very encouraging. You know, when the Muslims, when the Ottomans, when they were in conflict with the Habsburgs, with Austria, you know, the white nationalists today, they like to point to that time as a great victory of the West, a great victory of the West, of Christendom against the Muslims, because Austria saved Europe, right, from the expansion of Islam. Side note, what country did Hitler come from? But I mean, look, what were you fighting against? Seriously. How was it better for you to fight against the Ottomans? Honestly, if you had any sense at all, you would have welcomed them. You would have welcomed the Muslims. Austria would have been better off then, and it would be better off now had you done that. I mean, what were you defending? Be objective. What were you defending? Nobody would have prevented you from remaining Christian. You could have stayed Christian. So you weren't defending Christianity. No one was going to stop you from going to church, but the church would not have ruled you anymore. And you know, it wasn't long before you realized yourselves how detrimental it was to have the church ruling you. You overthrew the church your own selves. So what were you defending? Feudalism? Defending your right to be a serf? To be a slave to your feudal lords? We didn't have feudalism in Islam. Fighting against us was a crime. It was a crime that you committed against your own selves. Your brave, white, noble ancestors, right? Who stood as the bulwark of Christendom. How they held back the Turks, you know, how they defended Vienna. And like I say, you celebrate it. You paint your pictures about it, you sing your songs about it, and of course you murder Muslims in a masjid in Christchurch with the date of the Battle of Vienna on your gun. That's right. You saved Europe from the Muslim tide. Just like Robinson says he's doing right now. That's what Tommy Robinson thinks he's doing now. But I have to ask, what were you defending in Austria, and what are you defending now? Seriously, what's so precious? Again, your right to be a serf? That's it? That's what you fought for? You drew a line in the sand and said, no further, Muslims. You shall not take my right to be owned by a local lord. No, you shall not tear up my deed of bondage. You're backwards. I mean, the Ottomans come and they offer you a system where any man, Muslim, Christian, Jew, can own land. You didn't have that. You can take your case to a judge, a real judge, a law book, not some drunken baron whose whim gets enforced as the law. No, you could go to court and get justice, no matter who you were, no matter what your level was in society, no matter what your religion was. They offered you a system where the law is actually written down and it applies to everyone, the poor and the powerful. You know, we came up with the rule of law. That's a concept that you got from us. And you said, no, I don't want that. I prefer that to have the boot of my feudal master on my neck. I said, you're backwards. Wallahi, you're backwards. You are defending your right to be ignorant. You are defending your right to be illiterate and to be uneducated, you know? In the Muslim world, they built libraries, they built universities, they built hospitals that looked like palaces. They were translating Greek texts that your own church had forgotten about or had suppressed, while your priests were telling you that the earth is flat. The Muslims are studying geography, studying astronomy, studying medicine, studying engineering, and you wanted no part of it. Who does that? You'd rather be burning witches, right? You were over there dying from the common cold. You were living in your own filth. You were scared of science. You were scared of knowledge. The medics of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire is performing surgeries. They're performing surgeries that you wouldn't even believe, while your village healer is bleeding you with leeches. No, you fought to protect that ignorance. You chose the leech over the physician, and that's exactly what you're doing right now. You were defending your right to persecute each other. That's the biggest joke of it all. You know, you fought against the Muslim infidels so that you could preserve your freedom to hunt your own as infidels. The Ottoman Empire, the Muslim, he sets up the millet system. He tells the Jew, here, run your own courts, practice your own faith. He tells the Orthodox Christian, you can keep your patriarch, lead your people. He gives them autonomy. That's what it was in the Muslim world. He gives them dignity. Do you know that there's more churches today per capita in the Muslim world than mosques? Per capita, I mean, per the number of Christians and per the number of Muslims. So if you're a Christian in the Muslim world, you have more choices in terms of which churches you can go to than even Muslims in the Muslim world have a choice of mosques to go to. Because we have real tolerance. We believe in real tolerance. But there's even more churches. In fact, there's more churches per Christian in the Muslim world than there even are in the West. Because as I say, we are genuinely tolerant people. If you came into the Islamic system, you wouldn't have been allowed to burn Jews in the town square, which is what you did. You wouldn't have been allowed to launch the Inquisition against the Protestants, which is what you did. You wouldn't have had your 30 years wars where Christians massacred other Christians by the millions over doctrinal disputes. No, these are doctrinal disputes that a sultan would have settled in his court in an afternoon. You fought for the right to be bigots to your own neighbors. Yes, you did. Because that's how you are. That's how you are, that's how you've always been, and that's how you are today. You were defending your right to live under rigid classism. Again, in the Ottoman Empire, in the Muslim Empire, you could take a boy from a Balkan village and he could become the Grand Vizier, the most powerful man in the empire next to the Sultan himself. His mind was his passport. His merit was his nobility. You learned meritocracy from us. But what was your system? If you were born a peasant, you died a peasant. If your grandfather shoveled manure for, Baron von Evil Mustache, well, so will your grandson. Because there was no ladder in your society. There was only a hole. And what did you do? You fought to stay in that hole. I mean, does that sound familiar? Tell me that you're doing anything different right now. Tell me that you are doing anything differently right now. So I ask you again, looking at the history, looking at your history, looking at the facts, what on earth were you defending? What were you protecting? You weren't defending any sort of civilization. You were defending a feudal slaughterhouse. You weren't defending faith, because you could have continued to be Christian under the Muslims. You were defending the right of one Christian to murder another Christian for praying wrong. You weren't defending your right to have a future. You were defending your own eternal poverty. You were defending drunkenness, promiscuity, filthiness, disease, ignorance, persecution, oppression, and violence. That's what you were defending because that's your culture. Well, yes, congratulations. You successfully fought against your own salvation and won. And look at you now. Because you're backward, you call it a victory. But look at the history of Austria after that. The oppression, the wars, the pogroms, the ignorance. I call that a catastrophic mistake, but you call it a victory. You had a chance to step into a world of law, a world of learning, a world of order, a world of tolerance. But you chose the dungeon instead of the library. And you're doing the same right now. All of your so-called heroes, all of your so-called Western icons, your leaders, like I say, Cromwell, from Cromwell to Jefferson to whoever else, to Tommy Robinson, not a single one of those people fought for your freedom. No, they did not. And that's the truth. But this is how you are. We didn't sack cities, you did. We didn't burn books, you did. We didn't racially discriminate, you did. We didn't lock people into lifelong caste system style economic deprivation and subjugation, you did. You did and you do. And that's what you've always defended. And it's what you're defending right now. It's what Tommy Robinson is defending right now. Because that's how you are. I need you to understand this. Because, I see a lot of Westerners now at this particular moment talking about how bad things are getting over there in the West. You know, fascism, so forth, political violence. Now with the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the mass shootings that you have. They just shot up a homeless encampment the other day. They act like things are getting bad. No, the lipstick is just getting smeared off of that pig. That's all. That's all that's happening. You put lipstick on a pig and you crowned it Miss Universe. And now you act surprised when it acts like a pig instead of a beauty queen. No, you've been lying to yourselves. You've been fooling yourselves. You've been kidding yourselves. And it's just getting harder to do. That's all. It's just getting harder and harder to do, to believe your own lies. Your so-called civilization has never been any different than it is right now. You just pretended harder. And now you're not pretending as hard as you used to. And like I say, you're not pretending as hard as you used to because it doesn't matter as much as it used to. And it doesn't matter as much as it used to because you don't matter as much as you used to globally. Globally, I'm saying. You know, it's like that worker who hates his job and who hates his colleagues. Once he gets his 2 weeks notice, well, he starts acting a little differently around the office, a little more free. He stops pretending. That's you. That's your so-called civilization right now. That's America and that's the UK. Now, like I've said many, many times, I'm not saying this to be insulting, but you have to know the truth. You can do with it whatever you like, but you can't make an informed decision about your life and about what you stand for and about what you defend and about what you align yourself with and about how you define your identity unless you know the truth, unless you know reality, and unless you know your history. I know I've said it before, but look at all the outrage about Epstein, for example. Well, you can't be outraged about Epstein and not outraged about your whole history, if you're honest people. I mean, what do you think that your military does everywhere they go? Don't you know about the case that right now is being made by South Korean women over what your boys in uniform did to them for decades in South Korea? It's brutal. And you do it everywhere. You did it everywhere. And I know you'll get defensive and say like, oh, what are you saying? Muslims are perfect. Muslims never committed any wrongdoing. They did wrong too, you know. You know how absurd that sounds? It's like saying I wash my hands and you don't wash your hands, okay? I wash my hands, you don't wash your hands, and I tell you to wash your hands, and your response to that is you're not perfect. Do you think that I think that washing your hands makes you perfect? No, but it's better. It's better than not washing your hands. No one's perfect. Of course, Muslims have done wrong, obviously. We've made mistakes. We've had our share of excesses that we're ashamed of. But those types of wrongs, those types of mistakes, those types of excesses, those are your whole culture. This is literally the one thing that you are legitimately the best at and that you surpass and exceed the rest of the world in. This type of behavior. You know, it's like I saw a sister online and she was talking about how she wanted to move to a Muslim country. She's over there in America. And Americans are telling her, do you actually think that if you go over there to a Muslim country, there's no sin over there? No, people do sin and people do wrong everywhere. And she said, yes, of course I know that. Obviously, I know that. There are sins and sinful people in the Muslim world, but though they are not approved of in the Muslim world. You understand? In the West, they're not only approved of, they're promoted, they're elevated, they're praised, they're celebrated. Are you telling me that you can't see the difference? I mean, maybe you can't. Maybe you genuinely can't see the difference because that's how you are, as I say. Maybe you really can't see the difference, for example, between someone in the Muslim world, a Muslim in the Muslim world, who gives in to temptation and commits zina, fornication, commits zina, secretly, behind closed doors, feels guilty about it and ashamed about it and repents to Allah about it. You can't see the difference between that and, for example, your own children singing along with an explicit song on the radio about having sex with random strangers or about being a prostitute. You don't see the difference? Now, you can't see the difference because in your theory of moral relativity, a grain of sand weighs the same as a mountain. I've talked before about the glaring hypocrisy. For example, again, about the outrage in the UK over so-called immigrant or Muslim grooming gangs. When the fact is that 70 to 80% of these types of cases are committed by white Britons. That doesn't make you angry. I mean, the truth is that if you arrested half of the people at Tommy Robinson's rally, the sex offenses in the UK would instantly drop. Let's be real. I mean, out of that whole crowd, statistically speaking, at least 200 of those proud Britons are rapists. And you talk about political violence, you can't be serious. You're alarmed by political violence, you can't be serious. Do you actually think that political violence isn't exactly what your country, what your so-called civilization has always practiced? Or is the only consistent thing that you ever did practice? You always killed people over their beliefs. You always killed people over their politics. You always killed people over their faiths. You always killed people over their views. That's how you became a global power in the first place. And yes, obviously, you also always practiced it domestically as well. Imagine, I watched this guy on online, so-called body language expert. His name is Chase Hughes. And he did a video where he was saying that political violence is a dangerous new phenomenon in America. It's very dangerous. And he said that if you have to use violence instead of open debate in order to push your ideology, well, then that means that your ideology is empty. Well, he didn't do anything but say that Western ideology itself has never been anything but empty, because violence is exactly how you always pushed Western ideology. You always pushed it through violence. Not to mention the irony that this is coming from a military intelligence professional who excels in specifically psychological coercion and interrogation, meaning psychological violence. Yes, it's all part of that same military that I was just talking about, that same military that has operated as the world's biggest sex trafficking syndicate of all time. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. The West isn't falling down. Only the mask that they've been wearing is falling down. It's falling down and it's coming off. But most of us in the world have known for a very, very long time what your so-called civilization is really all about. So if you are someone in the West, if you're a Westerner, and you yourself actually do believe in what you have been told are Western values, then you need to understand that those values have never been Western. In fact, those are the values that they fought against. They fought against those values for centuries. But they did understand that those values, the values themselves, the values of the Muslim world, they've understood that those values are good, and they understood that those values have appeal, and that they make people stable, and they make people happy, and they make people fulfilled. So they adopted them as a language, as a rhetoric. They used those values as a pitch, as a line to feed you, because those values, as I say, are good values, and you'll eat it up. While the whole time it was a lie. Coming from them, it's a lie. And they never had any intention whatsoever of upholding those values.